AITA for expecting not to have to pay for Thanksgiving groceries. I've never posted here before, but I've been reading for a while, and I think I need to vent. Honestly, I'm feeling stuck and confused, and I don't know if I'm overreacting or if my friend is completely out of line, so here it goes. I'm a 54-year-old woman living in Italy with my family. We've been here for a long time, but I grew up in the US, and one tradition I've held onto tightly is Thanksgiving. Every year, I host a dinner for my family and a couple of close friends, and I put my whole heart into it. It's not just about the food, it's about the connection, the warmth, and the joy of sharing something meaningful. Since we live in Italy, getting the right ingredients isn't easy. There's no canned pumpkin, no cranberry sauce, and certainly no pre-made stuffing. I've had to learn how to make everything from scratch over the years, from pumpkin puree to the pie crust. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. My family and friends love it, and it makes me feel close to my roots. Now, let me introduce you to Anne. Anne is a 50-year-old woman I've known for a few years. She's originally from China, but she lived in the US for over 20 years before moving to Italy with her husband, who is British, and her husband are very wealthy. They have this absolutely gorgeous home-like, magazine-worthy with a huge, state-of-the-art kitchen that would make any chef drool. I've been there a few times for coffee or a casual lunch, and it's always struck me how different our lives are. My home is small and cozy, her place is sprawling and luxurious. But we've always gotten along well enough, and I've never felt like the difference in our lifestyles was an issue until now. A few weeks ago, Anne reached out to me with what seemed like a lovely idea. She'd heard about my Thanksgiving dinners and wanted to know if I could teach her how to make a traditional Thanksgiving meal. She wanted to host a big dinner at her house for 12 people, including her friends and a few mutual acquaintances. She said she thought it would be a fun way to celebrate and that she'd always admired my cooking. I'll admit, I was flattered. The idea of cooking in her amazing kitchen was appealing, and I thought it might be fun to share the tradition with a larger group. Plus, Anne seemed genuinely excited about learning how to make all the classic dishes, so I agreed. At first, everything seemed fine. We talked about the menu, and I kept it fairly simple. Turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes, candied yams, roasted vegetables, cranberry sauce, an appetizer, and pumpkin pie. It's what I usually make for my family, and it's not overly fancy, just the basics. And seemed happy with the plan, and I started to get excited about the idea. But then, the little red flags started popping up. The first issue came up when Anne decided she didn't want to have the dinner on Thanksgiving Day itself. She explained that it would be more convenient for everyone if we hosted it the Sunday before. Her reasoning was that Thanksgiving isn't a holiday in Italy, so people would still have to work during the week, and a Sunday dinner would make it easier for her friends to attend. While I understood her logic, the suggestion immediately rubbed me the wrong way. For me, Thanksgiving isn't just about the food or the gathering, it's about the day itself. There's something magical about Thanksgiving Thursday, the sense that millions of people across the US are doing the exact same thing at the same time, cooking, gathering, giving thanks. Even though I live in Italy now, I've held onto that feeling year after year. Having the dinner on a random Sunday felt like watering down the tradition, like reducing it to just another meal. Still, I reasoned with myself that the date wasn't the most important thing, and if it made things easier for her, I could be flexible. I told myself not to let it bother me and agreed to the new plan. Next came the shopping, which was supposed to be a collaborative effort. I suggested that Anne and I go shopping together so I could show her where to find some of the harder-to-source ingredients. Thanksgiving in Italy isn't exactly straightforward. You can't just stroll into a supermarket and grab a can of cranberry sauce or a ready-made pie crust. Over the years, I've discovered specific shops and suppliers for things like fresh cranberries and the right spices. I thought shopping together would be a practical way to split the workload and also give her insight into what goes into preparing a Thanksgiving meal from scratch. But when we started discussing logistics and casually suggested that I handle the shopping on my own, she said it would make more sense since I already knew where to go and what to buy. She added that she'd reimburse me for her half later. At first, I thought I'd misunderstood her. What did she mean by her half? Wasn't she hosting the dinner at her house? I had assumed that, as the host, especially given that she was inviting her friends, she would be covering the cost of the ingredients. I was already contributing my time, effort, and expertise, not to mention teaching her how to make the dishes. Why would I also be expected to pay for half of the food? When I asked her to clarify, she explained matter-of-factly that since it was a collaboration, she thought it was only fair for us to split the cost evenly. I was floored. I already felt like I was going above and beyond. I had agreed to plan the menu, figure out the shopping list, track down all the specialty ingredients, and cook the entire meal while simultaneously teaching her how to do it herself, all for a dinner that she was hosting in her home for her friends. And now, on top of all that, I was supposed to pay for half of it. I tried to explain to her that this wasn't something I could afford. My family lives modestly, and while we budget carefully for our own Thanksgiving dinner every year, doubling that expense for a meal I wasn't even hosting wasn't feasible. Anne, on the other hand, has a lifestyle where she and her husband wouldn't think twice about dropping hundreds of euros on a fancy lunch out. I had assumed, perhaps naively, that she would cover the costs without question. But she didn't seem to grasp why this arrangement was unfair or unreasonable. Instead, she acted as though I was being difficult for even bringing it up. Instead of reconsidering, and began suggesting ways to cut corners on the dinner. At first, she proposed scaling back the menu. She mentioned that we could skip some of the dishes or make smaller portions to save money and effort. Specifically, she suggested eliminating the candied yams and cranberry sauce altogether, calling them unnecessary extras. I was caught off guard. These aren't just random additions to the table, they're staples of a traditional Thanksgiving meal. To me, they represent the diversity and richness of the tradition. I tried explaining that these dishes are part of what makes Thanksgiving feel complete, but she brushed it off, saying her friends wouldn't care or wouldn't even notice if certain items were missing. Then came the comment that really stung, and said, almost flippantly, that her friends don't eat like pigs and wouldn't need such large portions anyway. The words hit me like a slap. I didn't know what to say at first. Was she implying that my usual Thanksgiving meals were excessive or gluttonous, that my family and friends overeat? The traditions I've spent years preserving are deeply meaningful to me. They're about abundance, generosity, and sharing, not overindulgence. But here she was, reducing it to some kind of critique on portion sizes. It felt like a fundamental misunderstanding of what Thanksgiving is about and a dismissal of everything I was bringing to the table literally and figuratively. I kept thinking, if you want to host a Thanksgiving dinner, why can't you respect what it entails? Why ask me to teach you if you're just going to tear it apart? And then, as if that wasn't enough, things took an even weirder turn. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Anne had gone behind my back and asked another guest to make the pumpkin pie using my recipe. I couldn't believe it. This was after she'd already agreed to the menu and told me she wanted to learn how to make the pie herself. The pie is one of the most iconic parts of the meal, and making it from scratch in a country where you can't even buy canned pumpkin is no small feat. It takes effort, skill, and preparation. I'd offered to show her exactly how to do it, but instead, she tried to pawn the responsibility off on someone else. Why? Because she didn't want to buy the ingredients herself. It felt so disrespectful, like she was trying to sidestep any real involvement while still reaping all the benefits. This wasn't just about the pie or the recipe, it was about the principle. She'd come to me, asking to learn and share in this tradition, but now she was trying to outsource parts of it, as if the work and care that went into it didn't matter. Worse, it made me feel like she didn't actually value my time, effort, or expertise. She wanted the glory of hosting a Thanksgiving dinner without putting in the effort or even the respect to do it right. It left me questioning her intentions and my willingness to keep going with this whole arrangement. By this point, I was feeling completely drained and disrespected. Anne's behavior didn't just feel cheap, it felt manipulative. She seemed more interested in offloading the work and expenses onto me than in actually learning or appreciating the tradition. My family was furious when I told them what was happening. They think Anne is taking advantage of my kindness and that her behavior is completely unacceptable. My husband and kids have been urging me to back out and tell Anne I'm not comfortable with how things are going. But I'm torn. Part of me feels like I should stand my ground and refuse to let her treat me this way. Another part of me feels guilty. I agreed to help her, and I don't want to come across as petty or unkind. But at this point, the joy I usually feel around Thanksgiving is completely gone. Am I being unreasonable for refusing to contribute to the meal? Should I have seen the red flags earlier and backed out before things got this far? I don't know if I'm overreacting or if Anne's behavior is as out of line as it feels. Update 1. A few days after discovering that Anne had tried to offload the pumpkin pie onto another guest without telling me, I was still feeling unsettled. Something about the whole situation wasn't sitting right with me, but I kept trying to convince myself that I was overthinking it. Maybe Anne was just disorganized. Maybe she didn't understand how much work goes into a Thanksgiving meal, or how important these traditions were to me. I reminded myself that I'd agreed to do this because I thought it would be fun and meaningful. But that optimism didn't last long. One afternoon, Anne called me and said she had a wonderful idea she wanted to share. Her tone was upbeat, almost giddy, as if she had solved some great puzzle. I was cautiously optimistic, thinking that perhaps this was her way of making amends after the pie fiasco or the awkward conversations about scaling back the menu. I told myself that maybe we were finally about to get on the same page, that she had realized how much this meal and its traditions meant to me. But as she began to explain her idea, my stomach sank with every word, and suggested, with an air of complete confidence, that since the dinner would be hosted at her house, it only made sense for me to take full responsibility for everything. Not just the cooking or the shopping, but everything. The planning, the sourcing of ingredients, the execution of the meal, and even the teaching element she'd initially emphasized. All of it would fall on me. Her reasoning was baffling. She said that because I already knew how to prepare a Thanksgiving dinner and had the experience of organizing it every year, it would be much easier for me to handle everything on my own. In her view, my familiarity with the process made me the natural choice to oversee the entire event. In exchange, she would provide her home as the venue and help out wherever she could. She delivered this suggestion as though it were some kind of gift to me, as though offering her house was a huge favor that should make me eager to take on the rest of the work. I was stunned into silence. My mind raced, trying to process what I'd just heard. This was not even remotely close to what we had originally agreed upon. From the beginning, Anne had approached me with the idea of learning how to prepare a Thanksgiving meal. She had framed this as a collaborative experience, where I would guide her through the process, teaching her the techniques and recipes so she could fully participate in the tradition. That was why I had agreed to this in the first place. It sounded like a meaningful way to share something I love. But now, she was essentially asking me to take over the entire event while she played host, reaping the benefits of a beautiful, meticulously prepared Thanksgiving dinner without lifting a finger. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dismissive this was of everything I'd already done. I'd spent hours planning the menu, organizing a shopping list, and preparing to teach her, all because she had claimed to want to learn. And now she was trying to pass everything off to me as if that was the plan all along. It wasn't just the sheer audacity of her suggestion that bothered me, it was the complete lack of acknowledgement for the emotional and cultural significance this holiday held for me. Thanksgiving isn't just another meal. It's a deeply personal tradition, one that I've poured my heart into maintaining even while living in a country where it isn't celebrated. For me, every dish, every step of the process holds meaning. I had agreed to share that with Anne because I thought she wanted to understand it, to connect with the holiday in a genuine way. But now it felt like she saw it as nothing more than an opportunity to host an elaborate dinner party for her friends, with me as the invisible engine running the whole show. I tried to remind her of our original agreement, though my voice was shaky from disbelief. I pointed out that this was supposed to be a collaborative effort, a chance for her to learn and be involved in creating the meal. That had been the entire premise of her invitation to host the dinner at her house. But Anne brushed that aside with almost dismissive ease, insisting that because it was her house and her friends attending, she had the right to make changes to the plan. She said it wasn't a big deal, as if I was overreacting for even questioning her suggestion. To her, this arrangement was just logical. Her home was the venue, so naturally, she should have the final say on how things were handled. It was as though she couldn't or wouldn't see how drastically she was shifting the dynamics of what we had agreed upon. The way she framed it, she made it sound as if she was doing me a favor by hosting the event in her beautiful home, like that alone justified every other responsibility falling onto my shoulders. But the more she talked, the more it became clear that she didn't see anything wrong with the imbalance she was creating. In her mind, this wasn't a betrayal of our agreement, it was simply a practical solution. And the worst part was, she genuinely seemed to believe she was being reasonable. It was as if she couldn't fathom why I might feel upset or taken advantage of. Her confidence in her own logic only made her suggestion feel more dismissive, as though the emotional labor and cultural significance I was bringing to the table didn't matter in the slightest. At first, I couldn't even find the words to respond. I was so taken aback by the audacity of her proposal that all I could do was sit there, replaying her words in my head and wondering how we had gotten to this point. The entire dynamic of our arrangement had shifted without warning, and I was left feeling blindsided and, frankly, insulted. This wasn't what I had signed up for, not by a long shot. It was becoming painfully clear that Anne saw this dinner as an opportunity to host a lavish event in her home, with me as the workhorse behind the scenes. What started as a collaborative and joyful experience had turned into something transactional and entirely one-sided, and I was starting to realize that my role in her plan had nothing to do with sharing a meaningful tradition and everything to do with convenience for her. Not only was I expected to do all the work, but she was also trying to position herself as the host and organizer, taking credit for a dinner that I would essentially be cooking and financing on my own. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about the money or the workload, it was about the principle. Anne had approached me with a specific request to teach her how to make a Thanksgiving dinner, and I had agreed out of goodwill and enthusiasm. But now she was trying to rewrite the terms entirely, all while making it seem like I was the unreasonable one for objecting. It felt manipulative, like she was trying to take advantage of my expertise and generosity while sidestepping any real responsibility herself. When I told Anne that I couldn't agree to her new plan, she acted like I was the one breaking our agreement. She reminded me that I had promised to help her and claimed that backing out now would be unfair to her and the guests who were expecting a Thanksgiving dinner. But the more she talked, the more I realized how one-sided her view of the situation was. She wasn't considering my time, my effort, or the fact that I was already doing her a huge favor by agreeing to teach her in the first place. Instead, she was framing this as though I owed her something, as though my initial agreement meant I was obligated to go along with whatever changes she wanted to make. At that moment, I realized I had to draw a line. I told him that I had every right to step away if I felt the arrangement was no longer fair or respectful. From the very beginning, we had agreed on a collaborative process where I would guide her through the meal preparation, but now she was shifting all the responsibility onto me while presenting herself as the host and organizer. That was never what I signed up for, and I wasn't going to let her guilt me into taking on a role I hadn't agreed to, and didn't take it well. She seemed genuinely shocked that I was standing up for myself, as if she hadn't expected me to push back at all. She tried to argue her case, but I could tell my refusal had thrown her off. For my part, I was just as shocked at how the situation had escalated. I couldn't believe how much had changed from the initial excitement of planning a Thanksgiving dinner together. What was supposed to be a fun, collaborative experience had turned into something stressful, frustrating, and deeply disappointing. Update 2. The next morning, I sent in a polite but firm message explaining that I couldn't move forward with her new plan. I reiterated that our original agreement had been for me to help her learn how to prepare a Thanksgiving meal, not to take on the entire responsibility myself. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with the way things had evolved and that I would no longer be able to participate. I was careful to keep my tone calm and professional, even though part of me wanted to let loose and tell her exactly what I thought of her behavior. Anne's response came within minutes, and it was exactly what I had expected: outrage. She couldn't believe I was backing out after I had promised to help her. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, insisting that I was making a big deal out of nothing. Her message was peppered with phrases like, "I thought we were friends and I can't believe you're doing this to me." It was clear she saw herself as the victim in this situation, completely ignoring the fact that she was the one who had changed the terms of our agreement without consulting me. Over the next few days, Anne bombarded me with messages and calls, each one offering a new compromise that was even more absurd than the last. In one message, she suggested that I could cook everything at my house and then bring the dishes to her home on the day of the dinner. She assured me that she'd reimburse me for the cost of the ingredients eventually. In another message, she floated the idea of hiring a cleaning service to make up for the work I'd be doing in the kitchen, as if that would somehow balance the scales. She even suggested that I could just prepare the turkey and a couple of side dishes while she ordered the rest of the meal from a local restaurant, completely missing the point that this was supposed to be a homemade Thanksgiving dinner. I ignored most of her messages, but when I did respond, I made it clear that my decision was final. I told her, again and again, that I couldn't participate under these conditions and that I hoped she would respect my boundaries. But Anne didn't seem to understand the concept of no. Every time I thought she had finally given up, another message would arrive, filled with guilt-tripping and yet another half-baked proposal. She tried to frame each new idea as a win-win, but in reality, they were all just variations on the same theme. Me doing all the work while she played hostess. It was exhausting. I found myself dreading every notification on my phone, wondering what new scheme Anne had come up with. At one point, she even tried to rope in mutual friends, asking them to talk some sense into me and convince me to reconsider. Thankfully, most of them saw through her manipulation and didn't get involved, but it was still incredibly uncomfortable. I hated the thought of being dragged into drama over something that was supposed to be joyful and celebratory. Eventually, Anne seemed to realize that I wasn't going to budge. The messages stopped, and for a brief moment, I thought the whole ordeal was finally over. But then I started hearing whispers from mutual friends and acquaintances, and was looking for someone else to take over the dinner. She had reached out to several people in our social circle, trying to find someone who could cook a full Thanksgiving meal, or at least help her piece together the dishes she wanted. From what I heard, most people either declined outright or offered to bring a single dish rather than commit to the entire menu. Anne's desperation became almost comical. She reportedly tried to negotiate with a local chef, offering to promote their business in exchange for a discounted rate. She even considered ordering the entire meal from a fancy catering service but balked at the cost when she realized how expensive it would be. It was clear that she wanted the prestige of hosting a perfect Thanksgiving dinner without putting in the work or the money to make it happen. The whole situation became something of a running joke among our mutual friends. People couldn't believe the lengths Anne was going to in order to avoid taking responsibility for her own event. It was ironic. Really, she had started out wanting to learn how to make a Thanksgiving dinner, but by the end, she was doing everything possible to avoid cooking at all. It felt like poetic justice in a way, though I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness at how things had turned out. I had genuinely wanted to share this tradition with Anne, and it was disappointing to see how little she had valued the opportunity. As for me, I went back to planning my own Thanksgiving dinner at home, just as I had done every year. It was smaller, simpler, and far less stressful than what Anne had envisioned, but it was mine, and for that, I was grateful.